What if death isn't inevitable? What if hidden within our very DNA lies a code that could unlock human immortality? In laboratories across America, scientists are making discoveries that challenge everything we thought we knew about aging and death. Some humans are already living proof that the boundaries of human lifespan might be nothing more than biological suggestions waiting to be rewritten. Meet Sarah Naus from Pennsylvania, who lived to 119 years old, or Jean Calment from France, who reached 122. These aren't just statistical anomalies. They're living laboratories that have captured the attention of America's most prestigious research institutions. At Harvard Medical School, Dr. David Sinclair's team has been studying families where multiple generations routinely live past 100, seemingly immune to the diseases that claim most of us before our 80th birthday. But here's where it gets truly extraordinary. In 2019, researchers at Boston University documented a family in New England where 7 siblings all lived past 105 years old. When they analyzed their blood, they found something unprecedented: cellular markers that suggested their bodies were aging at roughly half the normal human rate. Their telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes that typically shorten with age, were maintaining length in ways that defied conventional biology. The implications sent shockwaves through the scientific community. If some humans naturally possess genetic variants that dramatically slow aging, could we identify and potentially replicate these mechanisms in others? The hunt for the immortality code had begun in earnest, and the early findings were more promising than anyone dared imagine. In the sterile corridors of the Salk Institute in California, something remarkable happened in 2016 that would reshape our understanding of aging forever. Scientists took skin cells from a 114-year-old woman and reprogrammed them back to an embryonic state. These ancient cells, which should have been riddled with the molecular scars of over a century of life, suddenly began behaving like cells from a newborn baby. Dr. Juan Carlos Pizua Belmonte, leading the research, watched in amazement as the cellular clock seemed to reverse itself. The cells not only looked younger under the microscope, they functioned younger, dividing with the vigor typically seen only in youth. But this wasn't some science fiction fantasy. This was peer-reviewed research published in the most respected journals, suggesting that the aging process might be far more reversible than we ever imagined. Meanwhile, at Stanford University, researchers were making an even more startling discovery. They found that when they transfused blood from young mice into old mice, the elderly animals began showing signs of cellular rejuvenation. Their hearts grew stronger, their brains sharper, their muscles more robust. The young blood seemed to carry some mysterious factor that could literally turn back the biological clock. Dr. Tony Weiss-Corey, who led these experiments, decided to take the ultimate leap. In 2014, he began the first human trials, transfusing plasma from healthy young donors into patients with Alzheimer's disease. The results, while preliminary, showed cognitive improvements that traditional medicine couldn't explain. Some patients who hadn't recognized their own children began remembering faces and names. It was as if the young blood carried instructions that reminded aging cells how to function properly again. But perhaps the most intriguing discovery came from an unexpected source: jellyfish. The immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii, possesses something humans have long dreamed of: true biological immortality. When faced with physical damage, starvation, or old age, this remarkable creature doesn't die. Instead, it reverses its aging process and returns to its juvenile state, potentially repeating this cycle forever. American marine biologists studying these creatures at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution found that the jellyfish accomplish this through a process called transdifferentiation. Essentially, their old cells transform into young cells. And here's the shocking part: humans possess many of the same genes that enable this process. We just don't know how to activate them yet. The deeper scientists delve into the mechanisms of aging, the more they realize we're standing at the edge of a biological revolution that challenges the very foundations of what it means to be human. At the National Institute on Aging in Baltimore, researchers have identified what they're calling longevity genes, specific genetic variants that seem to act as molecular guardians against the ravages of time. Dr. Luigi Ferrucci, who leads the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, has been following the same group of volunteers for over 60 years, watching how they age at the cellular level. What he's discovered defies conventional wisdom. Some individuals carry genetic variants that produce proteins capable of repairing DNA damage, neutralizing harmful free radicals and maintaining cellular structures with remarkable efficiency. But here's where science meets the seemingly impossible. In 2020, researchers at the University of California, San Francisco, made a discovery that sent ripples through the scientific community. They found that some centenarians, people over 100 years old, don't just live longer, they live healthier. Their cells show signs of what researchers call super-aging, where the normal cellular deterioration associated with aging appears to slow down or even reverse. These super-agers possess unusually long telomeres, those protective chromosome caps that typically shorten with each cell division until the cell can no longer reproduce and dies. But in these individuals, the enzyme telomerase, often called the Immortality enzyme, remains highly active throughout their lives, continuously rebuilding these protective caps. It's as if their cells have found a way to reset their own expiration dates. Even more fascinating is the discovery of what scientists call zombie cells, or senescent cells, damaged cells that should die but instead linger in our bodies, releasing toxic substances that accelerate aging. In most people, these zombie cells accumulate over time, contributing to everything from wrinkles to heart disease. But super-agers seem to have enhanced cellular cleanup systems that efficiently eliminate these harmful cells before they can cause damage. The implications are staggering. If we could understand and replicate these mechanisms, could we essentially reprogram the human body to maintain itself indefinitely? Some researchers believe we're not just looking at extended lifespan, but at the possibility of achieving what they call negligible senescence, aging so slow it becomes virtually irrelevant to human lifespan. In a nondescript laboratory at Harvard Medical School, Dr. David Sinclair holds a vial containing what might be humanity's first glimpse at practical immortality. The clear liquid contains molecules called NAD+ precursors, compounds that can restore the energy production systems in aging cells. In mice, these molecules don't just extend lifespan. They reverse age-related decline so dramatically that 24-month-old mice begin performing like 6-month-old mice in cognitive and physical tests. But Sinclair's work goes beyond supplements. His team has identified a master regulator of aging called the SIRT1 gene, which appears to control how cells respond to stress and damage. By activating this gene, they've achieved something that sounds like science fiction. They've made old cells young again, not just in appearance, but in function. Heart cells that had lost their ability to beat rhythmically suddenly regained their youthful vigor. Brain cells that had accumulated the protein plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease began clearing them away. The research has moved beyond laboratory animals. In 2022, the first human trials began using a combination of growth hormone, metformin, and DHEA, a cocktail designed to reverse the aging process at the cellular level. The results, published in the journal Aging Cell, showed that participants' biological age actually decreased over the course of the study. Their immune systems grew stronger, their cognitive function improved, and biomarkers of aging moved in the direction typically seen in much younger individuals. Meanwhile, at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, researchers have begun targeting senescent cells directly. Using drugs called senolytics, they can selectively eliminate these zombie cells from the body. In preliminary human trials, patients with age-related conditions showed remarkable improvements. Joint pain decreased, energy levels increased, and some participants reported feeling decades younger within weeks of treatment. But perhaps the most extraordinary case comes from Liz Parrish, a 53-year-old American entrepreneur who became the first human to undergo experimental gene therapy designed to reverse aging. In 2015, she received injections of modified viruses carrying genetic instructions to activate telomerase production and enhance muscle regeneration. 5 years later, her telomeres had actually lengthened, something that shouldn't be possible in adults. While the scientific community remains cautious about her results, independent testing has confirmed changes in her cellular markers that suggest her biological age has decreased. These aren't isolated incidents. Across America, a new field called longevity medicine is emerging, where doctors are beginning to treat aging itself as a disease that can be prevented, treated, and potentially cured. The FDA is considering reclassifying aging as a treatable condition, which would open the floodgates for research and development into anti-aging therapies. Standing at the threshold of potentially infinite human lifespan, we face questions that would have seemed absurd just decades ago. What happens to society when death becomes optional? What are the ethical implications of a technology that could create a world where some people live for centuries while others age and die naturally? Dr. Aubrey de Grey, a controversial but influential researcher at the SENS Research Foundation in California, believes we're approaching what he calls longevity escape velocity, the point where life extension technologies advance faster than we age, effectively making death from aging obsolete. His calculations suggest that the first person to live to 1,000 years old may already be alive today. But the implications extend far beyond individual longevity. Economic systems built around retirement at 65 would collapse. Educational models designed for careers spanning 40 years would become obsolete. Family structures, inheritance laws, and social hierarchies would all require fundamental restructuring. Some economists predict that extreme longevity could either usher in an unprecedented golden age of human achievement or create a dystopian society divided between the immortal elite and the mortal masses. The environmental impact poses another critical concern. A world where humans live for centuries could face unprecedented population pressures. Resources that seemed abundant when human lifespan was limited to roughly 80 years might become critically scarce when multiplied across centuries of consumption per person. Yet the potential benefits are equally staggering. Imagine scientists, artists, and thinkers who could accumulate centuries of knowledge and experience. Consider the problems that could be solved by minds that have had hundreds of years to mature and develop. The greatest composers, writers, and inventors in history might have produced works of unimaginable brilliance if they'd had centuries instead of decades to perfect their craft. Recent polls show that Americans are deeply divided on the prospect of extreme longevity. While 73% say they would want to live to 100 if they remained healthy, only 38% would want to live beyond 120 years. The closer the science gets to making extreme longevity possible, the more complex our relationship with mortality becomes. The research continues to accelerate. Venture capitalists have invested billions of dollars into longevity research, betting that the market for defeating aging will dwarf every other medical breakthrough in history. Companies like Google's Calico Labs, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos's Altos Labs, and dozens of biotech startups are racing to be the first to market with therapies that could fundamentally alter human lifespan. In laboratories across America, researchers work around the clock, knowing they might be on the verge of the greatest discovery in human history. The Code of Immortality isn't just a dream anymore. It's an active research program with measurable progress, concrete results, and a timeline that suggests the first effective anti-aging therapies could be available within the next decade. The question is no longer whether we can crack the Code of Immortality, but whether we're prepared for a world where death is no longer inevitable. The science suggests that for the first time in human history, we might actually have to decide how long we want to live. And that decision may be closer than we think. As we stand on the brink of potentially rewriting the most fundamental aspect of human existence, one truth becomes clear. The age of immortality isn't coming, it's already here. The only question remaining is whether we'll have the wisdom to use it wisely.